What if I told you there's a community in America that feeds entire families on less than what you spend on a single coffee? While we're all drowning in grocery bills, the Amish have been cooking incredible meals for pennies. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change how you think about food forever. 1. Ribble soup. Picture this. It's 1850s Pennsylvania. Snow piles up outside wooden homes. Families of 10 need feeding. But money's tight, and the store is miles away through frozen roads. That's when Amish mothers invented Ribble soup, a dish so clever it turned almost nothing into everything. The name sounds fancy, right? It's actually German for to rub, because that's exactly what you do. Take flour, crack an egg, add water. Now rub everything between your fingers until tiny dough pearls form. Drop them straight into boiling broth. Here's the genius part. These little dough bits puff up and thicken the soup naturally. No cream needed. No expensive ingredients. Just chemistry and wisdom combined. The broth? Whatever's available. Chicken if you butchered recently. Potato water if the cellar's full. Plain water when times get really tough. Those ribbles absorb every drop of flavor and turn thin liquid into something that sticks to your ribs. 1 pot, 10 minutes, 8 people fed. The math makes modern meal planning look ridiculous. 2. Tomato gravy. Back when people thought tomatoes were poisonous, the Amish knew better. They canned hundreds of jars every summer. Come winter, when meat ran scarce, someone looked at those jars and had a brilliant idea. Pour canned tomatoes into a hot pan, add milk, stir in flour until it thickens. That's it. You just made gravy. The tanginess cuts through the milk's richness. The flour holds everything together. Pour it over biscuits, fresh or day-old, and suddenly you've got a main course that nobody leaves hungry from. What's remarkable, 3 ingredients create flavors that taste like you worked all day. The tomatoes bring sweet acidity, the milk adds body, everything balances perfectly. This was plant-based eating before Instagram made it trendy. Budget cooking before anyone wrote books about it. Just practical people turning summer's bounty into winter's comfort. 4. Fried bread. Modern cooks pour bacon fat down drains. The Amish save every golden drop in jars by the stove. When bread goes stale, and trust me, it always does when you bake 12 loaves at once, it gets a second life. That hard bread hits a cast iron skillet slicked with bacon drippings, and magic happens. The transformation is instant. Crispy outside, tender inside. Smoky flavor that makes it taste like luxury instead of leftovers. Timing matters more than technique here. Too long creates charcoal. Too short gives you greasy disappointment. Amish grandmothers learned to watch for golden edges and tiny bubbles. That's when you flip it. Serve it with eggs or apple butter, and you've turned what should have been chicken feed into breakfast that powers you through morning chores. One grandmother swore her bacon drippings jar was worth more than jewelry. Since she never wore jewelry anyway, maybe she had a point. 5. Corn pudding. Sweet corn was among the first crops Amish farmers planted in America. They quickly discovered it could be more than just a vegetable side dish. Corn pudding lives in this beautiful space between dessert and dinner. It shows up at church suppers right next to roasted pork and berry pies, confusing everyone and pleasing everyone simultaneously. Fresh milk from morning milking, corn kernels, eggs, just enough sugar to highlight natural sweetness without creating candy. The baking creates 3 distinct textures. The bottom sets firm like custard. The middle becomes tender and creamy. The top develops a golden crust that crackles under your spoon. Fresh corn brings crisp sweetness. Canned corn delivers softer, caramelized flavors. Both versions have devoted followers, and arguments about which is better can outlast church services. The beauty? Corn and milk are 2 things Amish farms never run short of. This recipe survived 2 centuries, not because it's fancy, but because it's reliable. You could make it blindfolded, and it still turns out perfect. 6. Brown butter noodles. The Amish relationship with noodles runs generations deep. They make them by hand, hang them on wooden racks, store them in cloth bags through winter. Brown butter noodles represent the ultimate lesson in doing more with less. Boil those homemade egg noodles until tender. Toss them in butter that's been heated just past melting until it turns golden and smells like toasted hazelnuts. Add salt. That's the entire recipe, and it's been gracing Amish tables since their great-great-grandparents cooked in log cabins. The trick is in the butter. Plain melted butter makes noodles slippery and rich. Brown butter transforms them into something that's
complex and deliberate. Watch the butter carefully as it heats. Wait for that exact moment when milk solids turn amber and your kitchen fills with nutty aroma. Pull it too early, you've got regular butter. Leave it too long, you've got bitter, burned butter. The window of perfection lasts maybe 30 seconds. Experienced cooks hit it without looking. No herbs, no garlic, no cheese, no spices. Just noodles, butter, and salt, proving that comfort food doesn't need long ingredient lists. 6. Pickled eggs. Before refrigeration, hard-boiled eggs presented problems for Amish families. Root cellars helped, but eventually eggs would spoil. Then someone had a revelation. Leftover beet juice, that deep purple liquid remaining after all the pickled beets were eaten, could preserve eggs for weeks. Drop peeled hard-boiled eggs into beet brine. Wait a few days. You've got eggs that are tangy, slightly sweet, and stained the most remarkable shade of pink. The color made them popular at gatherings, weddings, picnics, church lunches. Kids loved the novelty. Adults appreciated the flavor. Vinegar and beet sweetness soak through to the yolk, creating something that tastes nothing like plain boiled eggs. The brine somehow makes them easier to digest, too. The economics made perfect sense. You were pickling beets anyway because they grow abundantly. After eating the beets, you've got flavored vinegar that seems wasteful to discard. Eggs were abundant from dozens of chickens. This was zero-waste cooking before that phrase existed. Two abundant resources combined into something practical and delicious that sparked conversations at every gathering. 7. Oat pancakes with sorghum. Before wheat flour became affordable, Amish farmers grew oats for horses and realized humans could eat them too. Ground oats mixed with milk and eggs made pancake batter that cooked up dense and hearty, nothing like those fluffy buttermilk pancakes that came later. These had weight and substance that kept farmers full from breakfast through midday. Topped with sorghum syrup, they delivered sweetness and energy in equal measure. Sorghum was the Amish answer to expensive maple syrup. They grew the cane, pressed out juice, boiled it down into dark, thick syrup tasting earthy and complex. It didn't have maple's delicate sweetness. Sorghum brought robust, almost molasses-like flavor that paired perfectly with grainy oat pancakes. Some families preferred it to maple, claiming the stronger flavors stood up better to hearty foods. One stack of oat pancakes with sorghum could power someone through hours of plowing, harvesting, building, whatever the day demanded. Modern protein bars claim to do the same thing. They cost a fortune and come wrapped in plastic. The Amish figured out the original power breakfast using bulk staples and homemade syrup. 8. Farmer skillet. Morning chores meant early rising. Early rising meant breakfast needed to be fast, filling, and made from what was already cooked. The farmer's skillet solved all three problems at once. Take yesterday's boiled potatoes, slice them up, fry them in cast iron with onions until everything gets crispy around the edges. Crack a few eggs on top, let them cook until whites set. Complete meal in less time than hitching up horses. Cast iron did most of the work. Amish cooks kept their skillets seasoned so well that nothing stuck and everything browned perfectly. Potatoes got crispy without grease. Onions caramelized without burning. Eggs cooked with lacy golden edges. Some families had cast iron skillets passed down through generations. The seasoning only improved with age. Those old pans had cooked so many breakfasts they could probably fry eggs in their sleep.
Adding bacon grease elevated everything if any was on hand. But the dish didn't require meat to satisfy. Potatoes provided bulk and comfort. Onions added sweetness and depth. Eggs brought protein and richness. Everything cooked in one pan meant only one thing to wash. That mattered when water had to be heated on the stove and hauled from wells. 9. Cabbage and apple slaw. Cabbage grew reliably even when other crops struggled. Apples dropped from trees with more abundance than any family could eat fresh. Combining them created a side dish that was crunchy, refreshing, and lasted days without refrigeration. Important when your cold storage was just a cellar dug into hillsides. Amish cooks shredded cabbage by hand using knives that could reduce whole heads to thin ribbons in minutes. Mixed it with sliced apples and dressing made from vinegar and sugar boiled together into light syrup. The flavor balanced perfectly between sweet and sour. Cabbage brought crunch and slight bitterness. Apples added fruity sweetness. Vinegar syrup tied everything together while helping preserve the mixture. It worked alongside rich, heavy foods like pork or beef, cutting through fat with brightness. Families served it at summer picnics and winter dinners with equal success. The vinegar prevented apples from browning and kept cabbage crisp for days. What made this slaw economical? Cabbage cost pennies per pound when bought, nothing when grown in your garden. Apples literally fell from trees. Even drops too bruised to sell worked perfectly when sliced into slaw. 10. Buttermilk dumplings. Winter soups in Amish kitchens started thin. A ham bone or vegetable simmering in water provided flavor, but not much substance. Buttermilk dumplings transformed modest soup into meals that filled bellies and stuck to ribs through cold afternoons. The dough came together quickly from buttermilk and flour, mixed just enough to hold together, then dropped by spoonfuls into boiling broth. Dumplings puffed up as they cooked, absorbing liquid and flavor while adding body to soup. Buttermilk made all the difference in texture. Regular milk dumplings turned out dense and heavy. Buttermilk's acidity reacted with flour to create dumplings that were tender and light, despite their filling nature. Amish cooks knew this long before food scientists explained the chemistry. They just knew buttermilk worked better. The slight tang from buttermilk added flavor complexity that made them taste more interesting than their simple ingredient list suggested. This was traditional filler cooking at its finest. One chicken that might feed 4 people could feed 8 when you added buttermilk dumplings. The dumplings soaked up chicken broth, carrying that flavor in every bite while bulking up the overall meal. It was mathematical as much as culinary. More dumplings meant less meat needed, but nobody felt shortchanged. 11. Liver and onions. Most modern Americans wrinkle their noses at liver. The Amish recognized it as cheap, nutritious protein that shouldn't go to waste. When a cow or pig was butchered, every part had value. Liver, full of iron and protein, deserved better than becoming pet food. Amish cooks developed preparation methods that made liver tender and palatable. Thin slices of beef liver got fried quickly with plenty of onions and a splash of vinegar. The acidity cut through strong flavor and improved texture. Onions played crucial roles beyond adding flavor. They released moisture and sweetness as they cooked, creating natural sauce that coated liver and mellowed its intensity. Vinegar did something similar, its acid breaking down liver's strong metallic taste into something more balanced and savory. Cooked properly, quickly over high heat until just done but not overcooked, liver stayed tender instead of turning tough and rubbery. Served with mashed potatoes and gravy, it became complete meals costing pennies per serving. The nutritional benefits made liver particularly valuable where physical labor was constant. One serving provided more iron than a week's worth of other meats, helping prevent fatigue and keeping energy levels steady. This was practical nutrition, focused on what bodies needed rather than what taste buds wanted. 12. Sweet milk toast. When ingredients ran low between shopping trips, Amish families fell back on what they called milk supper. Toast soaked in warm sweetened milk with butter melting on top. This wasn't poverty food exactly, though it certainly qualified as budget eating. It was comfort food in its purest form. Kids loved it because it was sweet and warm. Adults appreciated it because it required almost no effort and used ingredients that were always available. The preparation took longer to describe than to make. Toast some bread, tear it into pieces, place in a bowl, heat milk on the stove with a spoonful of sugar, pour over toast, add a pat of butter, wait a minute for bread to soak up milk and soften, eat. The whole process from start to finish took maybe 5 minutes. The warm milk made people sleepy, which was probably intentional. This was often a before-bed meal, the last thing eaten before everyone headed upstairs. What made sweet milk toast endure through generations wasn't sophistication, but reliability. It never failed, never disappointed, never required ingredients you didn't have. Bread, milk, butter, sugar, those were constants in every Amish kitchen. The foundation items that got restocked before anything else ran out. When the cellar was low and the pantry looked sparse, you could still make milk toast. It represented security in food form. 13. Tomato egg scramble. Summer gardens produced tomatoes faster than families could eat them fresh. Scrambling eggs with canned tomatoes and onion created colorful, cheap breakfast that Amish farmers called poor man's breakfast, though there was nothing poor about the flavor. Tomatoes added moisture and tang to eggs. Onions brought sweetness and texture. Together, they stretched 2 eggs into enough food for 3 or 4 people when served over bread or noodles. The technique required attention to heat and timing. Too hot, and eggs turned rubbery while tomatoes burned. Too cool, and everything turned watery and bland. Amish cooks learned to keep heat moderate, stirring constantly, letting eggs set slowly while tomato juice reduced into thick sauce that coated everything. The result looked almost fancy. Bright red tomatoes studded with golden eggs and translucent onions, despite costing almost nothing to make. Served over thick slices of homemade bread, it became meals that stuck with you through morning work. The stretching capability made this dish valuable for large families. 2 eggs alone might feed 1 person. Add a can of tomatoes and an onion, and suddenly you've got enough for several people. This was multiplication through addition, turning modest ingredients into abundant meals without expensive proteins or complicated techniques. 14. Mock chicken sandwich spread. During rationing times, when meat became scarce, Amish cooks created this spread that mimicked chicken salad's texture and satisfaction, using chopped boiled eggs, celery, and homemade mayonnaise. Nobody pretended it actually tasted like chicken, but it filled the same role in packed lunches and picnic spreads. Creamy, protein-rich, spreadable, and substantial enough to make sandwiches feel complete. The name stuck even after rationing ended because the spread proved too useful to abandon. Preparation stayed simple and reliable. Hard-boil eggs, chop them fine, mix with diced celery for crunch, bind everything together with mayonnaise made from eggs and oil. The texture mattered more than flavor. It needed to spread smoothly on bread without being too wet or too dry. Needed to hold together in sandwiches without squishing out the sides. The economics were straightforward. Eggs cost pennies, celery grew in gardens or could be bought cheap, mayonnaise made at home from oil and egg yolk was a fraction of store-bought costs. The resulting spread lasted several days, made dozens of sandwiches, and provided good protein without requiring any meat. Amish church gatherings still feature this spread today, not because meat is scarce anymore, but because the recipe works and people genuinely enjoy it. What started as a substitute during hard times became a tradition worth keeping. 15. Dutch potato filling. Mashed potatoes and bread cubes might sound like carbohydrate overload, but in Amish households, this combination became a holiday favorite that showed up year-round whenever leftovers needed using. Dutch potato filling mixed leftover mashed potatoes with torn bread, butter, and onions, then baked the whole thing until the top turned crispy and golden. It was heavier than traditional stuffing, more substantial than side dishes, and perfect for using up two items that never stayed fresh long: yesterday's potatoes and bread that had gone slightly stale. The texture made it distinctive. The bottom stayed soft and creamy from mashed potatoes. The middle became tender and flavorful where bread soaked up butter and moisture. The top developed a crunchy crust that shattered under forks. Every bite offered different textures, all of them satisfying. Onions cooked until sweet and soft, distributed throughout, added depth that kept it from being bland. The thrift aspect ran deep. Mashed potatoes rarely got eaten completely. There were always some left to clinging to pots or sitting in bowls nobody wanted to finish. Bread went stale when you baked large batches, which every Amish family did, because heating ovens once for multiple loaves made more sense than heating them multiple times for single loaves. Rather than throwing out these items or feeding them to livestock, Dutch potato filling transformed them into something people actively looked forward to eating. 16. Noodles with cottage cheese. Hot buttered noodles tossed with cottage cheese and black pepper might sound like something invented out of desperation, but the Amish have been serving this as a main dish for generations. The combination delivers protein without requiring any meat, costs almost nothing to make, and fills you up in ways that keep you satisfied through afternoon work. Homemade egg noodles get boiled until tender, drained while still steaming, then tossed with butter that melts into every crevice. Cottage cheese goes in next, its creamy curds coating noodles and creating pockets of richness throughout. Black pepper adds the only seasoning needed, sharp enough to wake up mild flavors without overwhelming them. The dish tastes richer than its simple ingredients suggest, proving that dairy and carbs together create something that feels indulgent even when it's budget cooking. This was everyday eating in Amish kitchens. The kind of meal that appeared multiple times weekly because it worked, satisfied everyone at the table, and never required trips to town for special ingredients. 17. Sliced apples and sweet cream. Fresh apples poured over with sweetened cream and cinnamon became the Amish answer to dessert when baking wasn't practical. During hot summer days when firing up wood stoves would turn kitchens into saunas, this no-cook treat provided sweetness without adding heat to already warm houses. The preparation took less time than setting tables. Slice apples thin, arrange them in bowls, pour sweetened cream over the top, dust with cinnamon. That's the entire process. Yet the result tasted special enough to serve at family gatherings. Cream came fresh from morning milking, still sweet and thick before any processing. Apples came straight from backyard orchards, varieties that might not win beauty contests, but delivered flavor store-bought apples couldn't match. Sugar dissolved into cream created simple sauce that complemented fruit's natural tartness. Cinnamon added warmth and depth, making everything taste more complex than it actually was. Kids considered this a treat worth getting excited about, which says something about simpler times when dessert didn't need chocolate or fancy preparations to feel like rewards. 18. Pork and sauerkraut. Sauerkraut and pork scraps slow-cooked together might not sound appetizing to modern ears, but this combination has anchored Amish tables for centuries, particularly on New Year's Day, when it's supposed to bring good luck. The dish emerged from necessity more than superstition. Sauerkraut helped preserve meat for days without refrigeration. The fermented cabbage's acidity broke down tough cuts into something tender and flavorful. What started as practical preservation became beloved tradition that showed up throughout winter months. The cooking process requires patience more than skill. Pork scraps that might otherwise go to waste, shoulder ends, rib trimmings, pieces too small for roasting, get layered with sauerkraut in heavy pots. Low heat and long hours do all the work. Pork fat renders out and mixes with tangy cabbage juice to create rich cooking liquid. Sauerkraut softens and sweetens as it cooks, losing its raw edge while maintaining enough bite to balance rich pork. Meat falls apart into tender shreds that distribute throughout the dish. What emerges after hours of slow cooking tastes far more refined than humble origins suggest. 19. Rhubarb custard bars. Rhubarb grows like weeds in Amish gardens, shooting up thick stalks every spring, whether anyone wants it or not. Smart cooks figured out how to turn this aggressive garden resident into desserts that balance tart and sweet without requiring expensive fruit. Rhubarb custard bars emerged as church social favorites, combining the plant's sharp tanginess with rich egg custard in formats that traveled well and fed crowds. The base layer used simple butter pastry pressed thin and baked just until set. Filling came together from chopped rhubarb, eggs, sugar, and cream, ingredients every Amish farm had in abundance during spring and early summer. Baking transformed raw rhubarb's mouth-puckering sourness into something balanced and complex. Custard set around fruit pieces, creating pockets of intense flavor surrounded by sweet richness. Bars cut cleanly into squares that held together when served, making them practical for gatherings where people ate standing up or sitting on benches. 20. Cornmeal dumplings. Cold days demanded hot soup, but thin broth alone didn't satisfy hungry workers who'd been outside splitting wood or mucking stalls. Cornmeal dumplings solved this problem by adding substance to any liquid without requiring expensive ingredients. The Amish would mix cornmeal with just enough water to form thick dough, pinch off pieces, and drop them directly into boiling soup or stew. Dumplings cooked quickly, absorbing broth's flavor while releasing starch that thickened liquid into something more substantial. Every spoonful suddenly contained solid food instead of just flavored water, turning light soup into filling meals. Cornmeal brought its own distinct flavor, slightly sweet, earthy, more interesting than plain flour dumplings. It also provided different nutrition than wheat, adding variety to diets that sometimes felt repetitive during long winters. Dumplings worked in chicken soup, vegetable broth, even plain salted water when nothing else was available. They never failed to bulk up whatever they were cooked in. These aren't just recipes, they're lessons in resourcefulness, proof that the best meals often come from the simplest ingredients handled with care and respect. While our grocery bills climb higher each month, the Amish have been quietly demonstrating that good food doesn't require big budgets. It requires knowledge, creativity, and the willingness to embrace simplicity. Every dish we've explored today started from necessity, but endured because it worked. These meals fed hard-working families through harsh winters, difficult times, and lean years. They're still being made today, not out of need, but out of love for flavors that satisfy both body and soul. Maybe it's time we stopped looking for solutions in expensive ingredients and complicated techniques. Maybe the answer has been sitting in Amish kitchens all along. Simple, honest cooking that proves comfort, tradition, and good taste never needed a big price tag to begin with.